I was working the rental car desk at Heathrow Airport when an American family walked up to the counter. The dad looked confident. Too confident. He slapped down his California license and said he was ready to drive across England. I asked him if he understood the basics of driving on the left side of the road. He laughed and told me not to worry. He had watched a YouTube video on the plane, a 5-minute YouTube video, for driving on the opposite side of the road in a foreign country. I handed him the keys and wished him luck. He made it exactly 3 roundabouts before calling us in a panic from a ditch. That same week, a woman from Texas asked me why British roads had so many decorative circles painted on the pavement. She thought roundabouts were art installations. She had been trying to drive straight through the middle of them for 2 days. 2 full days. Her rental car looked like it had been in a demolition derby. The front bumper was hanging off. She kept saying that American roads made more sense because they were straight and had clear signs. I pointed to the giant blue circular signs with arrows on them. She stared at me like I had just spoken ancient Greek. My colleague told me about a guy from Florida who got pulled over in Scotland. The police officer asked him why he was driving 50 miles per hour in a 30 zone. The American looked confused and said the sign clearly showed 30. The officer pointed at the speed limit sign that said 30. The American nodded and said exactly 30 miles per hour. The officer had to explain that in the UK, speed limits are in miles per hour, but the signs just show the number. The American then asked why they did not put MPH on every sign. The officer just sighed and wrote him a ticket. Another time, a couple from Arizona rented a car in Dublin. They got on the highway going the wrong way, fully the wrong direction on a dual carriageway. Cars were honking and flashing lights at them. They thought everyone was just being friendly and welcoming tourists. They waved back with huge smiles. It took a truck driver blocking the road and physically getting out to stop them before they understood. When the police arrived, the husband said he thought the Irish drove on the right side like normal people. Ireland drives on the left. It always has. These stories are not rare. They happen every single day at airports and rental desks across Europe, Asia, Australia, and basically anywhere that is not North America. Americans show up ready to drive with the confidence of a Formula One racer and the preparation of someone who skimmed a pamphlet. The chaos that follows is the same every time. Roundabouts become mystery puzzles. Road signs turn into abstract art. Parking rules sound like riddles. And the local drivers? They just honk and shake their heads as another American sedan weaves through traffic like a confused pigeon. I used to work at a car rental place in London, and roundabouts were the #1 reason Americans brought cars back early. One guy from Michigan returned his car after just 4 hours. He said the roads were broken and kept looping him back to where he started. He could not figure out that you exit a roundabout at different streets. He thought it was one giant defective circle. He had driven around the same roundabout 11 times trying to find the exit. 11 full loops. Other drivers were honking at him. He honked back because he thought they were stuck too. A woman from Oregon got so frustrated with roundabouts that she just started going straight through the middle of them. Not on the road, literally through the grass and flowers in the center. She told the police she thought the middle part was a shortcut for people in a hurry. The officer asked her why there were plants and a fountain in the middle of her shortcut. She said she assumed it was European decoration and that cars were allowed to drive over it. Her rental agreement did not cover off-road driving through municipal landscaping. She had to pay for the damages to 3 roundabouts and a small statue of a local historical figure. My friend worked at a hotel in Paris, and an American guest asked him why French roads did not have any stop signs. My friend explained that France uses yield signs and priority to the right rules at intersections. The American looked horrified. He asked how anyone knew when to stop if there were no signs telling them to stop. My friend said you yield to cars coming from the right. The American asked what happens if both cars arrive at the same time. My friend said you use common sense and communication. The American shook his head and said that would never work in America because nobody would follow the rules. My friend just nodded politely. Another guy from Nevada could not understand why European parking spaces were so small. He kept saying his SUV was a normal-sized car. It was not. It was a full-size American SUV that barely fit in European lanes, let alone parking spots. He tried to park it in a compact car space in Rome and got stuck between two tiny Fiats. He could not open his doors. He had to crawl out through the back hatch. A crowd of Italians gathered to watch and take photos. He asked them why Europe did not make parking spaces for real cars. One of the Italians pointed at the dozens of small cars parked perfectly around him and said they did. Just not for cars the size of buses. I heard about a family from Ohio who rented a car in Australia. They were told multiple times that Australia drives on the left. They nodded and said they understood. They did not understand. Within 10 minutes of leaving the rental lot, they were driving on the right side of the road. An Australian driver pulled up next to them at a red light and shouted at them to get on the correct side. The dad yelled back that they were on the correct side and everyone else was wrong. The Australian pointed at all the other cars driving on the left. The dad said those people were probably tourists too. They were not. The dad finally figured it out after nearly causing 3 accidents. His wife refused to let him drive for the rest of the trip. A couple from Illinois got confused by European road signs because they used symbols instead of words. They did not know what any of the symbols meant. They saw a sign with a picture of a car sliding and thought it meant a fun drift zone ahead. It meant icy roads. They hit a patch of ice going 60 and spun out into a snowbank. When the tow truck arrived, they asked the driver why the sign did not just say ice in English. The driver explained that symbols are universal and work for all languages. The husband said it would be easier if every country just used English words. The driver did not respond. Another time, a guy from Georgia complained that he got a ticket for parking in a no parking zone. He said there was no sign. I looked at the photo of where he parked. There was a giant yellow line painted on the curb and a sign with a red circle and a diagonal line through a letter P. He said he did not understand what that meant because it was not in English. I explained that a red circle with a line through something is the international symbol for no. He asked why they did not just write no parking like in America. I told him the symbol works for everyone regardless of language. He said it clearly did not work because he parked there. I did not have a response to that logic. My cousin worked as a tour guide in Italy, and she had an American tourist ask why Italian highways did not have a shoulder lane for broken-down cars. She explained that many European highways do have shoulders, but they are narrower. The tourist said American highways were better because they had wide shoulders. My cousin nodded and agreed that was nice. The tourist then asked why Europe did not just copy American highway designs. My cousin said probably because Europe had cities and roads that existed for hundreds of years before cars were invented. The tourist looked confused and said that did not make sense because cars were invented in America. My cousin did not bother correcting him. I worked at a petrol station in Scotland, and an American tourist asked me why the gas prices were so high. I told him the price per liter. He stared at me and said he did not speak metric. I explained that petrol is sold by the liter in the UK. He asked how much that was in gallons. I told him about 3.8 liters to a gallon. He tried to do the math in his head and gave up. He just handed me his credit card and told me to fill the tank. When he saw the total, he shouted that I had charged him for 4 gallons at $50 per gallon. I explained that he bought 40 liters, which is about 10.5 gallons, at a normal UK price. He said that was confusing and America did it better. I did not argue. Another time, an American couple was driving through Germany on the Autobahn. They were going exactly 65 miles per hour because that was the highway speed limit back home. German drivers were flying past them at over 100 miles per hour. The couple thought everyone was breaking the law. They called the police to report all the speeders. The operator explained that many parts of the Autobahn have no speed limit. The wife asked how that was legal. The operator said it just is. The husband said that sounded dangerous, and America would never allow that. The operator politely ended the call. The couple still drove 65 the whole way and caused a traffic backup for miles. A guy from California got a speeding ticket in Canada. He was going 50 in a 40 zone. He argued with the officer that he was only going 10 over, which was barely speeding. The officer agreed and wrote him a ticket. The guy got angry and said in California, "Nobody gets pulled over for going 10 over." The officer said this was not California. The guy then said the ticket amount was in Canadian dollars and asked if he could pay in real money. The officer asked what he meant by real money. The guy said US dollars. The officer just handed him the ticket and walked away. The guy later complained online that Canadian police were rude. Canadians responded by calling him a variety of creative names. I had an American guest at my hostel in Amsterdam who could not figure out why his GPS kept giving him distances in kilometers. He thought his phone was broken. I explained that Europe uses the metric system. He said his phone was American and should show miles. I told him his phone auto-adjusts based on location. He said that was stupid, and he wanted it to show miles, because that is what he understood. I showed him how to change the settings. He changed it to miles, but all the road signs were still in kilometers. He got confused and missed his exit 4 times, trying to visit a windmill that was only 20 kilometers away. A woman from Florida was driving in England and got pulled over for speeding. The officer said she was doing 70 in a 50 zone. She argued that the speed limit was 50 miles per hour, so she was only going 20 over, which was not that bad. The officer explained that UK speed limits are in miles per hour, and 70 in a 50 is significantly over the limit. She then said the speed limit signs were too small and hard to read. The officer pointed out that UK speed limit signs are pretty large and clearly marked. She said American signs were bigger and better. The officer wrote her a ticket. She posted on social media that UK police target American tourists. British people replied with photos of very clear speed limit signs. Another guy from Texas rented a car in France and could not figure out why the fuel efficiency display showed liters per 100 kilometers. He thought the car was broken. He took it back to the rental agency and demanded a car that showed miles per gallon. The employee explained that European cars display fuel economy in liters per 100 kilometers. The guy said that made no sense and asked how anyone could understand it. The employee said that millions of Europeans understand it just fine. The guy insisted on getting a different car. They gave him another car. It also displayed liters per 100 kilometers. He gave up and just ignored the display for the entire trip. A family from Arizona was driving through Switzerland and kept getting confused by the distance signs. They saw a sign that said Zurich was 80 kilometers away. The dad said that did not sound far, so they did not stop for gas. 80 kilometers is about 50 miles. They ran out of gas 30 miles later. When the tow truck arrived, the dad complained that the sign was misleading. The driver asked how a sign showing distance in the standard measurement system was misleading. The dad said it should have said 50 miles. The driver explained that Switzerland uses kilometers like most of the world. The dad said most of the world should switch to miles. The driver charged him extra for the attitude. I knew a guy from Wisconsin who got a parking ticket in Dublin. The ticket said he had parked in a disabled spot without a permit. He argued that the parking spot did not have the wheelchair symbol painted on it. The Irish parking attendant showed him the sign on the wall with the wheelchair symbol. The guy said that did not count because in America, the symbol is painted on the ground. The attendant explained that in Ireland, the symbol is on the sign. The guy refused to pay the ticket and said Irish parking rules were unclear. He later got a fine in the mail for triple the original amount because he ignored the ticket. I was working at a train station cafe in Brussels when an American guy asked me why Europeans did not drive anywhere. He said he had not seen anyone use their car since he arrived. I pointed out the window at the busy street full of cars. He clarified that he meant why people took the train instead of driving between cities. I explained that trains in Europe are fast, affordable, and convenient. He said Americans prefer cars because you have more freedom. I mentioned that sitting in traffic for hours is not exactly freedom. He said at least you control your own schedule. I pointed out that trains run every hour and you can work or relax during the trip. He just shrugged and said cars were still better. A woman from Tennessee rented a car in Japan and could not understand why everyone was driving so politely. She kept saying it was creepy. Cars were letting her merge. People were not honking. Everyone followed the rules. She said it felt unnatural and she did not trust it. I asked her what was wrong with polite driving. She said in America, you have to be aggressive or you will never get anywhere. I suggested that maybe aggressive driving was not a good thing. She disagreed and said American driving culture was more honest. I did not know what to say to that. A guy from Louisiana was driving in Sweden and got angry because cars kept flashing their lights at him. He thought they were being rude. Someone finally explained that in Sweden, flashing your lights means you are letting the other car go first. In America, flashing your lights usually means get out of my way. He had been interpreting every polite gesture as an insult for 2 days. He felt embarrassed, but also said Sweden should adopt the American meaning because it made more sense. The Swedish driver he was talking to just smiled and nodded. Another time, a couple from Indiana was driving through Spain and could not figure out why everyone parked on the sidewalk. They thought it was illegal. They kept parking in proper parking spots and walking long distances to their destinations. They later found out that in many Spanish cities, parking partially on the sidewalk is normal and often expected on narrow streets. They felt stupid for following the rules too strictly. They tried parking on the sidewalk the next day and got a ticket because they did it on a street where it actually was not allowed. They gave up and just took taxis for the rest of the trip. I heard about a family from Colorado who rented a car in New Zealand. They were confused about who had the right of way at intersections. New Zealand uses a give way to the right rule in some situations. The family thought the biggest car should go first. They drove a large SUV and just assumed they had priority everywhere. They almost caused 5 accidents in one day. A local driver finally stopped and explained the rules to them. The dad said the rules were too complicated and America did it better with 4-way stops. The local driver said New Zealand did not have many 4-way stops. The dad said they should install some. A guy from Pennsylvania was driving in the UK and could not understand why everyone kept honking at him. He was doing everything correctly as far as he could tell. It turned out he was driving in the bus lane the entire time. He thought it was just a regular lane that happened to have the word bus painted on it. He assumed it meant buses were also allowed in that lane, not that it was exclusively for buses. When the police pulled him over, he argued that the lane was not clearly marked. The officer pointed at the giant letters spelling bus on the road. The guy said that in America, lanes have better signage. The officer disagreed. A woman from North Carolina was driving through Italy and got frustrated with Italian drivers. She said they were too aggressive and always trying to cut her off. An Italian friend explained that Italian driving culture is more assertive and requires awareness and quick reactions. She said that sounded stressful, and American driving was more relaxed. The Italian friend laughed and said American drivers were also aggressive, just in different ways. She disagreed and insisted Americans were polite drivers. The Italian friend showed her YouTube videos of American road rage incidents. She went quiet and did not bring it up again. Another guy from Kansas rented a car in Ireland and drove for 3 days without using his turn signal once. An Irish driver asked him why he never signaled. He said he did not think it mattered because everyone could see where he was going. The Irish driver explained that turn signals are legally required and also just common courtesy. The guy said in America, people only use turn signals if they feel like it. The Irish driver said that sounded dangerous and selfish. The guy got defensive and said American drivers were fine without constant signaling. The Irish driver just walked away shaking his head. I met an American tourist who got upset because she received a ticket in Germany for running a red light on her bicycle. She argued that she was on a bike, not in a car, so traffic lights did not apply to her. The German officer explained that bicycles must follow all traffic laws, including stopping at red lights. She said that in America, bikes do not have to follow car rules. The officer said that in Germany, they do. She refused to pay the fine and said it was unfair. She later had issues leaving the country because unpaid fines can cause travel problems. She ended up paying it along with late fees. She posted online that Germany was a police state. Germans replied with confusion. I was at a car rental return desk in London when an American guy returned his car 3 days early. He said driving in Europe was impossible and he was done trying. I asked him what specifically was difficult. He said everything. The roundabouts did not make sense. The signs were confusing. The roads were too narrow. The parking was too tight. Other drivers were too fast. The speed limits were unclear. The measurements were wrong. I asked if he had read the driving guide we gave him. He said he skimmed it, but did not think he needed it because he had been driving for 20 years. I reminded him that he had been driving in America for 20 years. He admitted that might have been the problem. The thing is, driving rules are not universal. Every country has its own quirks and standards. What feels normal in one place feels completely wrong somewhere else. Americans grow up with wide roads, automatic transmissions, right-hand driving, and imperial measurements. That becomes the baseline for normal. Then they travel and discover the rest of the world does things differently. The shock is real. The confusion is genuine. But the insistence that the American way is the only correct way is what creates most of the chaos. I met a guy from Ohio who spent 2 weeks driving across Europe. By the end, he admitted that European roads actually made sense once you understood the logic behind them. Roundabouts were efficient. Narrow roads forced you to pay attention. Metric measurements were more precise. Polite driving culture made everything smoother. He said he wished America would adopt some of those ideas. Then he went home and immediately went back to his old driving habits because that is what everyone around him was doing. My favorite story was about a woman from Virginia who got lost in rural Scotland. She pulled over to ask a local farmer for directions. The farmer gave her clear instructions using local landmarks and road numbers. She thanked him and then asked if he could just put the address in her GPS. He explained that many rural Scottish roads do not have formal addresses or GPS coverage. She looked panicked and asked how anyone found anything. He said they used directions and maps like people did for hundreds of years. She said that sounded primitive. He shrugged and said it worked fine for him. She eventually found her destination using his directions. She later admitted it felt kind of nice to navigate without technology. These stories never stop. Every day, thousands of Americans rent cars in foreign countries and discover that driving is not the same everywhere. Some adapt quickly, some struggle but figure it out, and some just return the car and take trains for the rest of their trip. All of them go home with stories about how weird driving is in other countries. None of them stop to think that maybe to the rest of the world, American driving is